I think what we called at the end of last year self-driving commerce, there's now a term for it, right? It's agentic commerce. And if you think of all the purchasing you do in your life, there's a series of decisions behind them. So to go to an kind of self-driving commerce or agentic commerce, it is someone who understands you and your preferences and making those decisions for you, often behind the scenes in the background.
Welcome to the latest episode of Visa Spotlights, our podcast which explores the latest insights and innovations taking place in payments, commerce, and money movement. Today, I'm delighted to welcome our guest, Andrew Torre, who is Regional President for the 86 unique and diverse markets across Central and Eastern Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Andrew, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Dan. It's great to be here with you.
As we begin another exciting year, we can't help but look forward over the next 12 months. Digital payments are set to continue transforming how we buy, how we sell, and how we move money across the region. Innovation is driving greater speed, efficiency, and security with every swipe, with every tap, and every click that we make. In this episode, we're going to be looking at some of the key trends that are set to shape digital payments in 2025. We'll look at the transformative impact of AI. We'll look at the shift towards secure and seamless transactions, including with biometric authentication, and also look at some of the emerging new areas, such as real-time payments and embedded finance. Andrew, as we start, before we look forward, perhaps we could just spend a bit of time looking back over the last 12 months. What are some of the sort of shifts that you've seen in 2024 and the sort of the departure point as we look forward at the start of this year?
Yeah, it's always helpful as you start a new year to look back and reflect. And I think 2024 was another momentous year for commerce and certainly digital payments more broadly. And it kind of capitalizes and traces a number of trends that had really emerged during the pandemic and some of the behavior shifts during COVID. So if you just look back to 2019, and if you just think about just simple stats, which I think really talk a lot about what's happened in payments, 2019, 66% of all transactions or all volume on Visa cards was actually cash. And by the end of 2023, that had started to invert. And in fact, cash was only 52%. So you finally had a year where electronic payments was dominant, was in the majority. And then from 2023 to 2024, in that 1 year, another 5 percentage point gain in share for electronic payments. And that really is based on the fact a number of things were happening. One, we saw consumer behavior shift, certainly, and that's continued. You've seen more folks coming into the formal financial ecosystem. We've got a lot more credentials out there now, or cards, as we like to say. So 370 million, growing dynamic population, so more people using our products, more merchants that are available to them, or sellers. So that's almost tripled in the last 3 or 4 years as well. And just more e-com, more face-to-face. So just better buying. And it's not that cash is standing still. In fact, cash has grown by 4% during that period. So you see this big, inexorable shift, very quick shift, if you look at the last few years, towards digital payments and commerce.
Fantastic. So you really outlined that rapid sort of acceleration and transformation towards digital payments that we've seen over the last sort of few years. And I think each year has brought its own set of trends, and we've seen certain areas sort of really expand. When you look forward to the remainder of 2025, what are some of the key areas that you're really looking forward to, we think we should all be watching out for?
Absolutely. I think a number come to mind. First, we couldn't be talking about commerce and payments and not talk about artificial intelligence, although it's been around for a while. So we certainly see artificial intelligence being used in new and different ways, particularly in 2025. Second one is, as we've talked about some of those changes in consumer behavior, a lot of that is more shopping and spending digitally and virtually. So authentication and identification. So knowing who you are, Dan Baxter, when you're shopping in the virtual and digital world is increasingly complex and increasingly important. Third thing is we've seen a shift and modernization of payment systems. So real-time payments continues to grow, and that's something we're looking at and supporting as well. Part of whether it's RTP or other different networks, A to A payments, so account to account based payments, really important. Lots of things happening in that space as well. Obviously, we have to continue to think about embedded finance and the role embedded finance plays, buy now, pay later, et cetera. But there's continues to be a big shift there. Lots happening in that space. And of course, globalization, creator economy, lots of moves to be able to support faster, more efficient cross-border payments. So those are some of the big trends that we're thinking about.
Fantastic. So there's a pretty diverse area that we covered. And so perhaps we could go a bit deeper into each.
Absolutely.
As you said, generative AI is probably the most obvious place to start. It seems like the last 12 months, AI has really sort of become the mainstream in all aspects of how we live and work and play. I think more people are embracing AI than ever before. What shift do you think AI and what impact do you think it will have on payments across the region and perhaps globally?
Yeah. The interesting thing is, we, and Dan, as well as I do, Visa's been using AI, although in different ways and shapes. Before it used to be called machine learning, AI, we've been using for 30 years. We've been investing in it. It's a really, really important source of, protecting the ecosystem. And we've used it to identify behaviors, right? So whether from a fraud and risk perspective, something that seems abnormal, you can kind of find that needle in the haystack, and then you can make sure that you can protect consumers and their payments. So that's one area, and we continue to work on that. We've also used it in many other ways to help our clients, to help them really provide better, more flexible, but also more consumer-centric solutions. So just by knowing some of their behaviors and some of their preferences. So we've used it to work with them to be able to, for example, what's the next best action if you want to make Dan Baxter happy? What would you offer him? What's a purchase he should make, or what's a potential recommendation you make with him, and how can you incent him? So there's been a lot of that at play. I think there's some big shifts with generative AI, and it's if you think about it, it's relatively new, but this year alone we've gone multimodal. So consumers are using it and they're playing with it. I think what we called at the end of last year self-driving commerce, there's now a term for it, right? It's agentic commerce, and that really is different than the large language models where we're using and playing with, where we're asking them something and it's answering something generally. Agentic commerce is based on making decisions, and if you think of all the purchasing you do in your life, there's a series of decisions behind them. So to go to an kind of self-driving commerce or agentic commerce, it is someone who understands you and your preferences and making those decisions for you, often behind the scenes in the background. So, I've been joking with my own wife and kids about this last year may have been the last year that I explicitly made decisions about Christmas presents for them. Yeah, they laughed too, but with a smile because they think it'll probably do it better than I will. And you can see that there's the ability with that to be able to have my commerce agent know my daughters, know their preferences, know their friends, know what they want, and be able to make that purchase for them. But I think it goes beyond just that, actually. And, this week I was traveling. I was in Doha this week. And if you just think about the more mundane aspects of commerce that are critical. So my shopping list, had it known that, I was gone for 3 days this week, because it would know what my schedule is. It would tailor the shopping to where we are in my family and what our needs are. So I think there's going to be a big change in commerce, and we're working really hard to get ready for it, to make sure it's very easy when these commerce agents come that we work our payment credentials in, so to be able to make it super easy, but also given the data we have, always with consumer consent, to be able to provide some type of sets of preferences so these agents work smarter and better on our behalf. So we're pretty excited about what that next phase brings.
Great. So you spoke earlier around how digital payments has sort of grown over the last 12 months, and clearly AI is going to be a fuel and enabler for commerce to further transform moving forward. Yeah. One of the other areas that we've obviously seen grow as payments has grown is the sophistication of bad actors and the efforts in terms of fraud and identity theft, which is obviously a huge watch out and a huge focus for the industry. What are some of your thoughts in terms of that point around digital authentication moving forward and what industry needs to do to really stay ahead of those threats?
Exactly. You know, as I mentioned, the world's getting more complex. More and more transactions are happening e-commerce and in the virtual world. And ultimately, it was much easier to know you are who you are when you're at the point of sale, right? We're very good at securing the card and the credential to you. It gets delivered to you. But a lot of that breaks down or becomes more complex in a virtual world. So we really see identity being much more tied to biometrics that we're all used to today, right? It's hard to find anyone that you talk to now, certainly, of our generation or younger, that does not have a smartphone and is not using the biometrics capabilities of that smartphone to open your phone, open an app, and gain access. So we start to see that biometric solution, whether it's a fingerprint, or face, which are kind of the two big ones in Android and iOS, being used to help solve that problem of, who is this person when they're conducting commerce in the virtual world. And today we get around it through a number of different ways, right? So you've got cryptograms still that we use for e-commerce. You use things like CVV and putting that 3-digit code so you've got the card. And then we use these static or one-time passwords. And there's a lot of complexity. There's a lot of friction. And we know consumers like biometrics. So we're going to be using what's naturally there, which we're calling a Visa payment passkey that we're bringing to bear with a new e-commerce solution called Click to Pay to make it really simple and seamless. So if you imagine where we are today, where we will be, and we've already announced this and piloted it in Qatar with QMB, where e-commerce is ready for this unboxing moment. You get your card, it's already fit for e-commerce. It's whatever your alias is. So in our part of the world, in CEMEA, it's a mobile number. You can put in your mobile number. It immediately is going to pull up all of the credentials that you have. For me, they'd be Visa credentials, obviously. And the shipping address and everything's set. So it's a simple, very easy payment flow. And then, so there's a click there, and then there's a click when I pay. And if I have a Visa payment passkey and I happen to have an iPhone, I'll just put my face in front of the phone and it's 1, 2, done, very secure, seamless. That Visa payment passkey will not only help with e-commerce, but down the road, just identifying consumers in this way with their choice and their consent is going to solve lots of different use cases down the road as well.
Very good. So it's sort of building on that element around security, but also bringing in the convenience and personalization, which we know that consumers increasingly want, and improve the overall commerce experience. Yes. Another thing, obviously, consumers look for from their digital payments experience is speed. And the immediacy which payments can bring. One area that you just mentioned was around real-time payments. Perhaps you could sort of expand on that and give a bit more of a sense for the sort of the journey that real-time payments has been on, and why you think it's going to be so critical this year.
Yeah, there's we've been on this journey for years. So almost every country in the world has some form of, whether it's EFT or ACH or RTGS, these payment systems, and they tended to be batch and not real time. So the technology's there to be able to do things in real time. So almost every country in the world has either launched a real-time payment system or is in the process of building one, or certainly speccing it out. But we've seen more and more of these payment systems emerge. and they serve different use cases. There's lots of times where, you and I may have just had a dinner and you've paid the bill and I'm just sending you, money to be able to, pay for my half of that. There's a lot of was unarticulated demand in real time that now these real-time payment systems are fulfilling, and they're great and they've gained traction. But there are some things when you think about real-time and interoperable payment systems that are also, they tend to be irrevocable. So once you've made a payment, that payment's gone. So you've got to be sure that not only do you have the speed that you mentioned and the convenience, but you also have the ability to be able to see if there's potentially going to be fraud in that transaction to protect the consumer. And there's also we're fallible as humans. You may send something to the wrong person or you may have been tricked. The ability to make that irrevocable. So these systems are big, they're growing, they're really important. We work with and partner with them. So we're working to make sure that we can bring a new series of solutions to them, especially to solve for risk and fraud as well.
Good. So we've spoken around sort of areas such as commerce and some of the more traditional sort of consumer to merchant spending and also money movement in real-time payments. Another area is around A2A and account to account money transfers and payments. Could you talk a little more around A2A and what that means and what that looks like moving forward?
Yeah. So A to A is just moving money directly from one account to another. Now, I think people tend to think A to A is synonymous with these RTP systems, and that is certainly a major type of payment system that does A to A payments. Certainly, if you've heard of UPI, Pix in Brazil, and others, these are A to A payment systems. But you've got others out there that are not necessarily traditional real-time payment systems, but then still do it. You've got, mobile money players. You could argue that M-Pesa is a A to A payments. It is an A to A payment. So you're moving money from one person's account to another. Visa, as you know, Dan, has its own A to A payment system with Visa Direct, where we're able to move money across both cards, accounts, and wallets. And we've got 8.5 billion endpoints. And I think when you look at all of these different networks that are out there, one, it's great for consumers to have choice, to be able to use these different networks. And I was alluding to, some of the challenges with RTP networks or some of the same opportunity areas for these A to A networks, which is, how do you make sure you can make those transactions fast, convenient, but also secure? So there are new fraud and security solutions to make sure that when I decide I'm going to send someone money, that it really is to that person, right? Mm-hmm. So how do I know? And there's a lot of social engineering. It's one of the ways that AI has been being used to be able to create phishing schemes or spoofing or social engineering that is much more contextual and therefore much more harder for consumers to understand they're being tricked or defrauded. So having these what we call Visa Protect is a solution to be able to spot if I'm going to be sending money to an endpoint. It's actually looking basically at that endpoint to say, does it make sense for you to be sending it there? So to protect consumers. And then you think about just, mistakes can happen. How do we solve for dispute and chargeback mechanisms? People are generally used to being able to make a payment and having recourse if something goes wrong, if they make a mistake, if the good or service is not billed. So, we're starting to see a lot in this space around orchestrating payments, layering things on top that look like things like, traditional brand schemes would do, like Visa, to be able to have dispute resolution paths, and then to create kind of unified approaches like a pay by wallet, which is another solution we have to create uniformity around how to orchestrate A to A payments so they're safe, convenient, and secure.
Very good. So lots of exciting areas, and clearly all of these are together sort of driving that consumer adoption of digital payments and also increasing the consumer expectation that payments will be part of the experience when they're engaging with different types of business in different ways. Obviously, more and more businesses are looking at embedding finance into different aspects of services or solutions or offerings which they have. How are we thinking about embedded finance, and how are you seeing that trend
Yeah.
continue to emerge that we've also been looking at for the last couple of years?
Absolutely. The interesting thing is, just from a definitional perspective, because I think people have different notions of what embedded finance is. And historically, I would say embedded finance, most of us have, I'm buying a white good. So a refrigerator, a washer dryer, one of these big purchases. And someone would, at the merchant, maybe offer me an installment to be able to help finance that. That's been around for many generations. The same thing actually when you're buying a car, right? So either leasing or lending. And that really is, the finance is embedded in part of that purchase or procurement process. And now, you're seeing more broadly financial services are not necessarily being offered directly by your financial institution, but by software, an app, or another provider that is providing you a service, and they know that they can also, based on some understanding they have of you, offer some of these other services. So, what went to traditional point of sale installments is BNPL, otherwise known as, pay in 4 or pay in 6. So we're seeing more merchants, more providers that are offering this. Consumers like it. They like the simplicity and ease of, I've made $100 purchase or 100 dirham purchase, and I can pay it back in just 425 dirham payments. And behind that, there's some technology and understanding of the consumer as well to be able to offer the consumer the right offer at the right time. So we certainly have a solution called our Visa Installment Solutions that allows that to be used, to use our tech around all of our different clients and to make it available broadly to all of our Visa cardholders to be able to have a whole catalog of options to be able to offer consumers. But you see it more broadly taking shape beyond just payments. So, for example, there are lots of fintechs out there now that are supporting small and micro merchants. So they're supporting these merchants. The merchants are accepting payments, and they're using that data and their understanding of that merchant's business with that payment data to be able to say, okay, small seller, that's my client. I think you're going to have, you've got a lot of sales. I can see you're going to need some money for inventory. I can give you a loan at the right time, at the right price to be able to facilitate it. So it's very, very natural. And you'll see these things happening more and more, credit, insurance, et cetera. So it is a big trend, and you've got lots of tech players that are really starting to integrate. So it's a big area. It continues to grow, and we're certainly supporting it.
Very good. So we've covered 5 big topics already, and I think it would be remiss of us in a region which spans 86 markets and is one of the travel hubs of the world if we didn't look at cross-border payments,
Right.
Which obviously is so critical as there is globalization, as more people travel, as more people are interacting with businesses around the world. What are you seeing as some of the trends and the dynamics within cross-border?
Yeah, so, you talked about traveling. So, cross-border, well, first of all, cross-border has been growing at a good clip, and we've continued to see, good, strong growth in cross-border payments, both post-COVID, consumers coming back, spending. There was definitely a shift away from buying goods to buying experiences, and that's great, and that continues. You've also, I think, seen a couple of other trends, much more purchasing now, both physical goods and virtual goods on e-commerce, which often goes beyond borders. And that's certainly the beauty of a global network where you can have, a seller in Morocco making some beautiful handicraft, being able to sell it not just to the folks in that marketplace, but really to our 4.3 billion cardholders. That continues to happen. I would argue there's a few other things that are happening. One is consumers, merchants and sellers want these payments to be faster. They want more certainty. So you now see a lot of B2B payments. You see, we were just talking about the virtual world and creator economy, where creators want to get paid, and they want to get paid when they want to be paid. So, if you think about this use case, which is not a traditional necessarily card use case, where you're a creator and you want to be paid off of a certain platform, the ability to get your royalties or your payments when you want them is really critical. And that involves a different type of payment. It involves, maybe a couple $100. It needs to be fast because you want it, because it's your livelihood, and you want to kind of know how much you're getting. So I think we've been working and others have been working to make sure it's fast, near instant, it is convenient, and it is scalable. And I mentioned earlier around our own Visa direct rails, and we have the ability to send payments to our 4.3 billion cards, billions of accounts, and billions of wallets. And this is a trend, that we're seeing and our clients want, is the ability to push money to people, instantly, especially cross-border. And then if you couple that in with what I was talking more about, agentic commerce and self-driving commerce, there's this moment certainly now where smaller merchants may be able to be discovered not just on a global platform, but just because we understand the consumer's preferences, and that agent is able to find these merchants directly. So you need to make sure they get paid as well. So I think there's this continued trend towards faster and more simplistic payments that can support not just consumer to merchant payments, but more broadly B2B and small seller payments as well.
Very good. But it does mean your gift shopping next Christmas will have to go truly global.
It does.
Rather than just within the country or city that you're in.
It does. I'm going to need that, definitely.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much once again, Andrew, for joining us today. We've covered 6 really big topics there that we can monitor and follow throughout the year. And hopefully you'll be able to rejoin us in about 12 months' time, and we'll look at which of the predictions played out and what we've learned along the way.
Yeah, predictions are a tough game, Dan. But, some of the ones we picked are things that are already happening. For me, I think really what happens in AI and commerce is something that we'll see how that shapes out. I think the long-term arc is probably right, how it plays out. We'll see. The other things, I think we've got a lot of comfort that they're real needs in coming now.
Fantastic. Well, thank you once again, Andrew.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you've enjoyed the podcast, and please join us next time for more discussions on payments, commerce, and money movements across the CEMEA region. Thank you.